Picture this: the hushed quiet of a medieval night, the air crisp with the scent of damp stone and earth. Above you, the sky stretches endlessly, a tapestry of stars so vivid they seem close enough to touch. And below, in the still waters of the castle moat, those same stars shimmer back at you, not as random specks of light, but as a perfect, intentional reflection of the heavens above. This wasn't just a beautiful coincidence. It was a masterpiece of design, a hidden language written in water and light by the architects of the past. These moats were more than defensive barriers. They were celestial mirrors, carefully crafted to capture the cosmos on specific nights, weaving astronomy into the very bones of medieval fortresses. Why would castle builders go to such lengths? What secrets did these starlit waters hold? The answer lies at the crossroads of science, symbolism, and survival. For medieval minds, the stars weren't just distant lights. They were guides, omens, and even protectors. Aligning a moat with the heavens wasn't just about beauty. It was about harnessing the power of the cosmos itself. Some castles timed these reflections to mark sacred dates, turning the moat into a giant calendar etched in starlight. Others used them as part of intricate rituals, where the reflection of a particular constellation might signal the start of a ceremony or the arrival of an important guest. And yes, there were even those who believed these celestial mirrors could confuse invaders, turning the moat into a disorienting maze of light and shadow under the right night sky. But the true marvel lies in how these designs reveal the ingenuity of the medieval world, a time often dismissed as dark or backward. These moats were feats of precision, requiring an intimate understanding of astronomy, geometry, and even hydrology. Builders had to account for the angle of the water, the curvature of the earth, and the precise movement of stars across the seasons. It was a dance between the practical and the mystical, where every ripple in the water carried meaning. So as we dive into the secrets of these star-reflecting moats, prepare to see medieval castles in a whole new light. This isn't just a story of stone and water. It's a testament to human curiosity, creativity, and our timeless desire to reach for the stars, even if only in their reflection. When we think of castle moats, the first image that comes to mind is often a wide, deep trench filled with water, a formidable barrier meant to stop attackers in their tracks. But to reduce these structures to mere defensive tools would be like calling a cathedral just a roof over your head. Moats were masterpieces of engineering and symbolism, designed to serve multiple purposes that intertwine the practical with the profound. Take their reflective surfaces, for example. While a still moat might seem like a simple byproduct of calm weather, many were intentionally crafted with precise depths and carefully smoothed stone edges to act as mirrors for the night sky. This wasn't just for beauty's sake, though the sight of stars dancing on the water must have been breathtaking. These reflections served as celestial calendars, marking solstices, equinoxes, and other significant astronomical events. The connection between moats and the heavens goes even deeper. In an era when the stars were seen as divine messengers, aligning a moat with specific constellations could transform it into a sacred space. Some castles positioned their moats to reflect particular star patterns on feast days, turning the water into a shimmering altar under the open sky. Others used these reflections in rituals. Imagine a king standing on the battlements as the mirrored image of a certain star cluster signaled the start of a coronation ceremony. And let's not overlook the psychological impact. Picture an invading army approaching under a moonless night, only to find the castle seemingly floating on a sea of stars, the boundary between earth and sky blurred. That disorienting spectacle could be as effective as any wall in sowing doubt and hesitation. What makes these designs truly remarkable is the sheer precision behind them. Medieval builders didn't just dig a trench and fill it with water. They calculated angles, studied seasonal star movements, and even accounted for the way ripples would distort reflections under different wind conditions. This was astronomy applied to architecture, a marriage of science and art that challenges our modern assumptions about the so-called Dark Ages. Far from being primitive, these moats reveal a society deeply attuned to the rhythms of the cosmos, one that sought to capture the infinite in the stillness of water. So the next time you see a castle moat, look beyond its defensive role. You might just find the stars looking back at you. To understand just how advanced medieval builders were in astronomy, we need to look beyond the moats, though they were certainly masterpieces of cosmic engineering. Across Europe, castles and cathedrals were often positioned with breathtaking precision, their walls and windows aligned to capture the sun's rays on solstices or equinoxes. A shaft of light might pierce a darkened chapel only once a year, illuminating a specific carving or altar on a sacred date. These weren't happy accidents. They were deliberate acts of celestial choreography, where stone and sunlight became partners in a grand astronomical dance, but the stars held even greater significance. Certain castles were oriented so that their moats mirrored key constellations like Ursa Major or Orion on nights of political or spiritual importance. Imagine the awe of witnessing a coronation or royal wedding timed to coincide with the reflection of a bright star cluster in the water below. These events weren't just ceremonial, they were statements of power, linking earthly rulers to the divine order of the cosmos. And for navigators, these reflections served a practical purpose too. In an era before compasses were widespread, a moat calibrated to reflect Polaris, the North Star, could act as a fixed reference point, helping travelers or messengers orient themselves under cover of darkness. Perhaps most fascinating are the accounts of moats being used as omens. Some medieval chronicles describe how the clarity or distortion of star reflections was interpreted as divine messages. A still, perfect mirror might signal favor from the heavens, while turbulent, fractured reflections could warn of impending strife. This belief in celestial signs wasn't superstition. It was a worldview that saw the sky and earth as intimately connected. And the architects of the time didn't just build for defense or worship. They built bridges between the human and the cosmic, crafting structures that could literally hold the heavens in their grasp. What's often overlooked is the sheer technical skill required to achieve these effects. Unlike static stone alignments, water reflections demanded an understanding of fluid dynamics centuries before the science was formally defined. Builders had to account for seasonal changes in water levels, the angle of the moat's banks, and even the refractive properties of water, all without modern tools. That they succeeded so often speaks to a tradition of observation and experimentation that rivals modern astronomy. These moats weren't just reflecting pools, they were the medieval equivalent of planetariums, where every ripple carried the weight of both science and symbolism. So when we marvel at the precision of ancient observatories like Stonehenge, we should remember that the medieval world had its own equally sophisticated and far more liquid ways of mapping the stars. Water in medieval Europe wasn't just a physical element, it was a doorway to the divine. Think of how often it appears in sacred texts and art, baptismal fonts cleansing the soul, holy wells brimming with healing power, even the river Styx separating the living from the dead. This profound symbolism seeped into castle moats, transforming them from simple defenses into liminal spaces where earth and heaven touched. Their still surfaces didn't merely repel invaders, they acted as thresholds, capturing the night sky to forge a tangible link between the castle's inhabitants and the cosmos above. This connection wasn't poetic license, it was a deeply held belief. Medieval scholars saw water as a conductor of celestial forces, a liquid mirror that could trap and amplify the influence of the stars. Some moats were designed with shallow, gently sloping edges to minimize ripples, ensuring the clearest possible reflections during key astronomical events. The smoother the water, the stronger the bond between the earthly and the ethereal. In certain castles, the moat's alignment with specific stars was so precise that on holy nights, the reflection would appear to merge with candlelit processions along the banks, creating the illusion that the heavens themselves were participating in the ritual. The spiritual weight of these designs becomes even clearer when we examine medieval myths. Legends spoke of enchanted lakes where knights glimpsed visions of the future, or fountains that granted wisdom to those who drank under the right stars. Moats channeled this same mystique. Their waters weren't just barriers but oracles. Chroniclers wrote of kings consulting the clarity of star reflections before battles, interpreting distortions as divine warnings. Even the moat's circular or rectangular shapes held meaning, echoing the geometric perfection of the celestial spheres as described by philosophers like Ptolemy. What's truly striking is how these beliefs shaped practical design. Builders didn't just dig moats, they sanctified them. Records from monasteries describe blessings performed over newly filled moats, with priests invoking the stars to consecrate the water. Some castles even incorporated sacred springs into their moats, blending natural holiness with engineered precision. This fusion of faith and function reveals a worldview where every ripple carried meaning, and a well-placed reflection could be as vital to a castle's identity as its towering walls. So when we see these star-aligned moats today, we're not just looking at medieval engineering, we're witnessing the liquid heart of an entire cosmology. Shay-Tau de Chambord stands as a breathtaking testament to the marriage of astronomy and ambition. Its moat, a vast, glassy expanse encircling the castle's iconic double helix staircases and forest of spires, was no ordinary trench, it was a celestial canvas. On the coldest night of the year, when the winter solstice draped the sky in darkness, the water's surface transformed into a perfect mirror of Orion, the hunter. The constellations' belt stars aligned with such precision that they appeared to pierce the castle's central spire, as if drawing power from the heavens themselves. This wasn't just artistry, it was a calculated display of authority by King Francis I, a ruler who saw himself as a modern-day embodiment of Orion, the mythic sovereign of the skies. The engineering behind this spectacle reveals a mind-boggling attention to detail. Builders didn't just dig a moat, they sculpted it. The depth was calibrated to minimize distortion, while the angle of the banks ensured reflections remained crisp even in winter's chill. Records suggest astronomers collaborated with stonemasons, using primitive quadrants and star charts to align the moat's curves with Orion's path. But the true stroke of genius lay in timing. The solstice reflection coincided with the king's annual feast, a night when nobles gathered to witness the heavens literally bow to Chambord. Imagine the scene, torchlight flickering along the parapets as Orion's reflection climbed the spire, a visual metaphor for the king's divine right to rule. Beyond spectacle, this design carried layers of meaning. Orion wasn't chosen at random, it was linked to myths of kingship across cultures, from ancient Egypt to Renaissance Europe. By anchoring his castle to this constellation, Francis wove his legacy into the stars themselves. Even the moat's irregular shape, often dismissed as a quirk of design, may have served a purpose. Some historians argue its asymmetrical curves mimic the ecliptic, the sun's path through the zodiac, turning the entire castle grounds into a working model of the cosmos. What's often overlooked is how this celestial branding extended beyond the solstice. Chronicles describe lesser reflections throughout the year, Venus shimmering in the Moat during diplomatic visits, or the Pleiades appearing during royal births. Each event reinforced the idea that Chambord wasn't just a residence, it was a conduit between earthly and celestial power, and while invaders might scoff at such symbolism, the psychological impact was undeniable. To approach Chambord on a starlit night was to confront a fortress that didn't just occupy land, it commanded the sky. The Moat's legacy challenges our perceptions of medieval science. These builders lacked telescopes or precise star maps, yet their understanding of celestial mechanics was profound enough to engineer liquid mirrors that functioned centuries later. Modern measurements show Orion's reflection still aligns within a margin of error smaller than the width of a sword blade, a precision that rivals today's planetarium projectors. So while Chambord's towers and turrets steal the spotlight, its moat whispers a subtler truth, that the Renaissance wasn't just about rediscovering ancient knowledge, but about bending the cosmos itself to human will. Far from mere decoration, that shimmering reflection was the ultimate power move, written in water and light for all eternity. Creating a moat that could mirror the stars with perfect clarity was no simple feat. It demanded a level of engineering sophistication that rivals modern precision tools. Medieval builders weren't just digging trenches, they were crafting liquid telescopes, meticulously calculating every variable to ensure the water's surface became an unbroken window to the cosmos. Take depth, for instance, too shallow, and the slightest breeze would send ripples racing across the surface, scattering reflections into chaos. Too deep, and the water's natural currents would distort the stars beyond recognition. The ideal depth varied by location, but records suggest many moats were engineered to a consistent depth of around 6 feet, deep enough to stabilize the water while still allowing light to penetrate and reflect with crystalline clarity. But depth was just the beginning. The shape of the moat's walls played an equally critical role. Unlike the steep, sheer drops of defensive ditches, these reflective moats often featured gently sloping sides, sometimes lined with smooth stone or even polished metal, to reduce turbulence where water met land. Some castles took this further, embedding hidden baffles or submerged barriers just below the surface. These unseen structures acted like underwater breakwaters, dissipating the energy of waves before they could disrupt the mirror-like finish. Imagine the ingenuity, a moat that looked like an ordinary body of water by day, but by night revealed itself as a carefully tuned instrument for capturing the heavens. Then there was the matter of alignment. A moat might be perfectly still, but if its orientation didn't match the arc of the stars overhead, the reflection would be useless. Builders relied on a combination of compass bearings and astronomical charts to position their moats along precise celestial sightlines. Some even incorporated markers, like notches in the castle walls or aligned statues, to help verify the angles during construction. The result, moats that didn't just randomly reflect the sky, but actively tracked specific stars or constellations as they moved across the night. What's truly astonishing is how these medieval engineers compensated for limitations we'd consider deal breakers today. Without laser levels or digital models, they used plumb bobs and water-filled trenches to ensure flat surfaces. Lacking precise timekeeping, they timed their reflections based on seasonal star positions and the length of shadows. And perhaps most remarkably, they accounted for atmospheric refraction, the way starlight bends as it passes through Earth's atmosphere centuries before the phenomenon was formally documented. This wasn't guesswork, it was the product of generations of observation, experimentation, and painstaking record-keeping. The legacy of these designs lingers in unexpected places. Modern architects studying fluid dynamics have found that some medieval moat shapes, particularly those with curved, asymmetrical profiles, actually outperform contemporary models at minimizing wave interference. And historians poring over old manuscripts continue to uncover notes where builders debated the merits of different materials for moat linings, from packed clay to lime mortar, each chosen for its ability to preserve that perfect star-catching stillness. Far from being primitive, these moats stand as monuments to a forgotten golden age of engineering where water wasn't just a barrier, it was a bridge to the stars. Celestial navigation wasn't just for sailors crossing open seas, it was a lifeline for anyone traveling under medieval Europe's vast, unpolluted night skies. Without reliable compasses or road signs, stars were the original GPS, and castle moats became unexpected waypoints in this cosmic roadmap. Picture a messenger galloping through the blackness, guided only by the glint of Polaris mirrored in a distant moat's still waters. That reflection wasn't just beautiful, it was a beacon deliberately engineered to align with well-trodden paths. Some castles positioned their moats like celestial lighthouses, their star-capturing surfaces visible for miles across flat terrain. The Abbey of Mont Saint-Michel, perched on its tidal island, famously used its moat's reflections to guide pilgrims, its mirrored constellation of Lyra acting as a spiritual North Star for weary travelers nearing the sanctuary. Trade routes benefited just as much as pilgrims. Along the Rhine River, merchant caravans relied on castles like Marksburg, where the moat's summer reflection of Arcturus marked a critical fork in the road. The star's position in the water indicated whether to turn toward Frankfurt's markets or south toward the Alpine passes. These designs reveal a clever fusion of commerce and cosmology. Moats weren't just defensive. They were medieval infographics, translating celestial patterns into earthly directions. Even the moat's shape played a role. Circular moats like those at Berg Eltz created a natural compass rose, with reflected stars appearing to rotate predictably around the castle's central keep, helping travelers recalibrate their bearings. But the true genius lay in how these moats adapted to seasonal changes. Winter constellations like Orion reflected differently than summer's Cygnus, allowing castles to serve as year-round guides. Chronicles from Lübeck describe how its moat's winter alignment with Sirius helped Hanseatic traders navigate frozen Baltic routes when landmarks were buried in snow. And unlike static stone markers, water's fluidity allowed for adjustments. Some moats could be partially drained or diverted to shift reflections as trade routes evolved. This wasn't just wayfinding, it was dynamic infrastructure blending astronomy with urban planning. What's often overlooked is how these navigational moats doubled as diplomatic tools. A castle positioned along a contested border might intentionally amplify its celestial reflections during peace talks, using the shared language of the stars to foster unity. Records from the Congress of Arras mention how the Duke of Burgundy's moat, calibrated to reflect Cassiopeia during negotiations, became a neutral meeting ground, literally bringing opposing factions under the same sky. In an era when maps were rare and territories disputed, these shimmering star maps offered a universal coordinate system, transcending language and allegiance. The legacy of these designs still echoes today. Modern archaeologists using LiDAR have discovered faint, star-aligned ditches around ruined castles, proof that even modest fortifications participated in this cosmic network. And while GPS has replaced celestial navigation, there's poetry in knowing that centuries ago, the surest path through the darkness wasn't a gadget, but a castle's silent pact with the stars. These moats remind us that the past wasn't just about survival, it was about creating meaning, turning everyday journeys into conversations with the infinite. Among the most captivating uses of star-reflecting moats were the sacred rituals that transformed still waters into portals for communion with the divine. Picture the eve of a royal coronation, where the future king would stand at the moat's edge as the reflection of Vega, the brightest star in Lyra, ascended to meet the tip of his ceremonial scepter. This wasn't mere pageantry. It was a celestial endorsement, a moment when heaven and earth seemed to align in approval of the new ruler. Chronicles from Burgundy describe how the dukes timed their investitures to coincide with the moat's perfect mirroring of the corona borealis, the northern crown, symbolizing their divine right to rule. The water's surface became a stage where cosmic drama unfolded, with every ripple scrutinized for omens. Divination rituals took this further, with priests interpreting distortions in the starry reflections as messages from the beyond. At the Abbey of Cluny, monks would chant psalms while observing how the Pleiades cluster fractured in the moat's waters. A smooth reflection promised abundant harvests, while fragmented stars warned of coming plagues. These practices weren't blind superstition. They stemmed from a sophisticated understanding of atmospheric optics. Medieval scholars knew that clear, still air produced crisp reflections, while hazy or turbulent skies, often precursors to storms or unseasonable cold, would scatter the light. The moat became a living barometer, its surface translating weather patterns into celestial signs. Religious ceremonies reached their zenith during solstices, when entire processions would circle the moat bearing torches, their flames mingling with the reflected stars above. Manuscripts from Canterbury describe how the winter solstice turned the moat into a liquid advent calendar, with each major star's appearance marking a step toward Christ's birth. Some castles took this symbology to extraordinary lengths. Notre Dame de Chartres moat was engineered so that on the summer solstice, the reflected Milky Way appeared to flow directly into the cathedral's sacred well, visually uniting cosmic and earthly waters. What modern observers often miss is how these rituals blurred the line between science and spirituality. When a queen consulted the moat's reflection of Mars before battle, she wasn't just seeking mystical guidance, she was tapping into generations of astronomical records that linked the planet's position with seasonal warfare advantages. The red planet's reflection appearing unusually bright might signal dry weather favorable for cavalry, while a dim, wavering image could warn of autumn rains that would bog down armies. These moats were medieval decision-making tools where the stars didn't dictate fate. They illuminated patterns. Perhaps no ritual was more poignant than the passing of the mirror ceremony documented at several French castles. When a lord lay dying, attendants would position his bed to view the moat's reflection of Polaris, the steadfast North Star. As his eyesight failed, the water's gentle movement made the star appear to pulse rhythmically, easing the transition from life to afterlife by visually mimicking the heartbeat of the cosmos itself. This practice reveals the moat's ultimate role, not just reflecting light but reflecting meaning, turning the vast impersonal sky into an intimate companion for life's greatest moments. Far from being relics of primitive belief, these rituals showcase a culture that saw no divide between the measurable movements of stars and the ineffable mysteries of existence. The moat was their telescope, their altar, and their storybook all in one. A castle moat glittering with the night sky wasn't just a defensive feature, it was a psychological masterstroke. Imagine arriving at a fortress after weeks of travel, exhausted and uncertain, only to find its waters alive with constellations, as if the Lord within had tamed the heavens themselves. This spectacle wasn't accidental, it was theater designed to unsettle and impress in equal measure. Medieval rulers understood that power wasn't just about walls and weapons, it was about controlling perception. A moat that mirrored the stars sent an unmistakable message. The castle's authority extended beyond Earth, into the divine realm above. the effect was particularly potent under a moonless sky when the stars burned brightest. Invaders approaching in darkness would find the moat transformed into an uncanny void, its surface flickering with distant suns, the boundary between water and sky dissolved, making the castle appear to float in space, a disorienting illusion that could stall an army's advance. Chroniclers recount how besiegers at Shay-Tau hesitated for days, spooked by the way Orion's reflection seemed to guard the gates like a celestial sentinel. Some even interpreted distorted reflections caused by nothing more than a light breeze as omens, abandoning their campaigns entirely. But the psychological game wasn't just for enemies. Visitors of high status, ambassadors, rival nobles, even royalty were often escorted across the moat's bridges at night when the starry display was most dramatic. The implicit threat was subtle but undeniable. If the castle's lord could command the cosmos, what chance did mere mortals have against him? This theater of awe reached its peak during diplomatic negotiations, where the reflection of a significant constellation, like Leo for a king born under that sign, might be accidentally timed to coincide with talks. The effect was a nonverbal power play, reinforcing hierarchy without a word spoken. Artistry amplified the intimidation. Some moats incorporated hidden channels or submerged platforms to create controlled ripples, making stars appear to dance on command. At Heidelberg Castle, engineers devised a system where opening a sluice gate would send a deliberate wave across the surface, fracturing the reflection of Mars, a visual metaphor for the chaos awaiting those who defied the castle's rule. Other lords took a gentler approach, using the moat's reflections to bless allies by aligning specific stars with their arriving ships or carriages, turning celestial mechanics into a gesture of favor. The brilliance of this strategy lay in its flexibility. Unlike static carvings or paintings, the moat's reflections changed with the seasons, allowing rulers to adapt their symbolism. A winter siege might showcase the steadfast North Star as a symbol of resilience, while a summer feast could feature Vega's brilliance to celebrate prosperity. Even the absence of reflections could be weaponized. Some castles drained their moats during conflicts, leaving only dark, empty trenches. The sudden disappearance of the starry mirror was a grim omen, signaling the Lord had withdrawn divine favor along with the water. What modern observers often overlook is how these displays exploited universal human instincts. Long before psychology named the halo effect, medieval rulers knew that association with celestial glory elevated their status. By framing their fortresses as conduits between earth and heaven, they tapped into deep-seated awe of the cosmos, a feeling as potent today as it was 800 years ago. So the next time you see a starry night reflected in water, remember, you're glimpsing an ancient language of power, one that turned ripples and starlight into weapons of the mind. Alchemy transformed castle moats into more than defensive barriers. They became crucibles where water, stars, and human ambition fused into something extraordinary. For medieval alchemists, water wasn't just an element. It was the universal solvent, capable of absorbing and transmitting celestial forces. When starlight struck a moat's surface, it didn't merely reflect, it imprinted the cosmos onto the water, charging it with astral energy. Records from Prague Castle describe alchemists working under Emperor Rudolf II, who would collect moat water at precise moments when Vega or Sirius dominated the reflection, believing it held enhanced power for their experiments. This wasn't mystical guesswork, it was a systematic approach to harnessing the heavens where the moat acted as a celestial funnel. The symbolism ran deep. Alchemical texts often depicted the moon and stars dissolving into water, a metaphor for the soul's purification. At Shay-Tau de Pyriphons, the moat's alignment with the Pleiades during the spring equinox turned its waters into what alchemists called the mirror of the wise, a surface where the macrocosm of the stars met the microcosm of their laboratory flasks. Manuscripts reveal that some experiments required water drawn only when specific constellations appeared unbroken in the moat's reflection, as if the star's perfect image guaranteed the purity of their work. One recipe for the elusive philosopher's stone even called for moat water collected under a full moon while Cassiopeia's reflection touched the castle's alchemical furnace. But this wasn't just about potions and transmutation. The moat's role in alchemy reflected a broader medieval quest to unite science and spirit. Alchemists viewed the castle as a living organism, with the moat functioning like a circulatory system, distributing celestial energy through the fortress. At Heidelberg, hidden channels fed star-charged water into laboratories where its astral imprint was believed to accelerate reactions. Skeptics might dismiss these practices as superstition, but the underlying principle that environmental conditions affect chemical processes was centuries ahead of its time. Modern studies show that moonlight can indeed alter water's surface tension, a subtle phenomenon these alchemists might have observed empirically. The most fascinating accounts come from secretive orders like the Rosicrucians, who allegedly designed moats as celestial batteries. At Castle Hundesberg, excavations revealed underwater channels arranged in geometric patterns matching the Star of David, not as religious symbols but as alchemical diagrams to amplify stellar reflections. During key planetary alignments, initiates would suspend mirrors beneath the water's surface, attempting to trap starlight for later use. Whether these techniques worked is less important than what they reveal: a relentless drive to decode nature's secrets, using every tool available from astrology to hydrology. What's often overlooked is how these practices influenced architecture itself. Some moats incorporated copper or silver linings not for decoration, but because alchemists believed these metals enhanced water's ability to fix celestial energy. The famed alchemist Paracelsus wrote of castles where the moat's shape mimicked the alchemical vessel, with the keep representing the king, gold, and the water, the queen, silver, their union mirrored in the stars above. This wasn't mere poetry, it was a blueprint for a world where every stone, every ripple held cosmic significance. The legacy of these star-aligned moats challenges us to see alchemy not as pseudoscience, but as a bridge between observation and intuition. When a modern chemist controls temperature and pressure for a reaction, they're not so far removed from those medieval scholars timing their work to the moat's reflections. Both seek to harness invisible forces, one with spectrometers, the other with starlight. So the next time you see a castle moat shimmering under the night sky, remember, it might just be the world's most beautiful laboratory, where water became the alchemist's silver thread tying Earth to the stars. Islamic astronomers didn't just map the stars, they turned gardens into celestial observatories. And this revolutionary approach to blending water and astronomy eventually rippled across Europe, reshaping how castles used their moats. While European lords were digging defensive trenches, scholars in places like Cordoba and Baghdad were designing elaborate courtyards where canals mirrored specific constellations, creating living star charts that tracked planetary movements with breathtaking precision. These weren't just decorative flourishes, they were sophisticated scientific instruments, allowing astronomers to measure celestial events without cumbersome brass astrolabes. When crusaders and traders brought these concepts back to Europe, they didn't just transport knowledge, they ignited a fusion of Islamic precision and European grandeur that transformed moats from simple barriers into cosmic mirrors. One of the most striking examples of this cross-cultural exchange lies in the water channels of Spain's Alhambra, where the reflection of Vega in the Court of the Lions was engineered to align with lunar cycles. European architects visiting Moorish cities marveled at how still waters could predict eclipses or mark solstices, and soon castles like Burg Eltz in Germany began adapting these principles. Their moats incorporated subtle curves inspired by Islamic qanats, underground channels that kept water unnaturally still, allowing stars to reflect without distortion even in windy conditions. The key innovation, Islamic hydraulics. By studying how Persian gardens used graded slopes and hidden weirs to control water flow, European builders realized they could stabilize moat surfaces to hold celestial reflections for rituals or navigation. But the transfer of knowledge wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. Islamic cosmology viewed water as a sacred intermediary between earth and sky, a belief that resonated deeply with medieval Europe's own spiritual traditions. When the Abbey of Cluny redesigned its moat in the 12th century, monks consulted Arabic texts describing how the pool of stars in Damascus' Umayyad Mosque captured the Pleiades during prayer times. The resulting design blended Benedictine symbolism with Islamic astronomy, creating a moat that reflected both the cross and the constellation Cygnus during feast days. This wasn't appropriation, it was dialogue with water as the shared language. The evidence lingers in architectural details. Some star-aligned moats in southern France feature carvings of Arabic numerals alongside Roman ones, marking depth measurements critical for reflection accuracy. At Shay-Tau de Tarascon, restorers found 14th-century ledgers ordering glass from Aleppo to line moat edges, a technique borrowed from Damascus to enhance reflectivity. Even the famous celestial clock in Prague's Old Town Square, often hailed as a purely European marvel, owes its liquid mercury dial to Persian designs described in manuscripts traded along the Silk Road. What's often overlooked is how this exchange challenged medieval Europe's worldview. Islamic astronomy didn't just offer new tools, it introduced the radical idea that the heavens followed predictable mathematical laws, a concept that turned moats into laboratories for testing cosmic order. When the moat at Windsor Castle perfectly mirrored Saturn's 29-year orbital return in 1392, it wasn't just a triumph of engineering. It was proof that the universe operated by rules accessible to human understanding. This quiet revolution, flowing from Islamic observatories to European castles, laid groundwork for the scientific revolution centuries before Copernicus. So the next time you see a medieval moat shimmering with starlight, remember, you're glimpsing a legacy of collaboration across cultures, where the quest to touch the heavens transcended borders, faiths, and even time itself. In the rhythm of medieval life, the turning of seasons wasn't just marked by changing leaves or migrating birds, it was written in the stars, and castle moats became the parchment. Far from being passive reflectors, some moats were meticulously calibrated to capture only certain constellations during critical agricultural windows, transforming them into celestial almanacs. Take the case of Burg Lichtenberg in Germany's Palatinate region, where the moat's angle was engineered so that the bright star Arcturus would appear perfectly centered in its waters for exactly 1 week each spring, a signal to begin sowing barley. The reflection wasn't just pretty, it was a deadline synchronized with soil temperatures that manuscripts describe as when the earth drinks as deeply as the moat holds the heavens. This fusion of astronomy and agriculture reveals a sophisticated understanding of phenology, the study of cyclic natural events. At Shay-Tau de Somme in France's Loire Valley, the appearance of the Pleiades cluster in the moat coincided with the last frost date for grapevines. Vinekeepers didn't need written records. They watched for the moment when the 7 sister stars shimmered without distortion in the castle's still waters, indicating stable nighttime temperatures. The precision was astounding. Modern researchers comparing medieval harvest records with astronomical data found these stellar reflections predicted planting windows within a 3-day margin of error accuracy, unmatched until the advent of modern meteorology. But the system had layers. Some moats used multiple reflection points for different crops. The now ruined stronghold of Olsztyn in Poland featured a moat with 3 distinct alcoves, one catching Vega's light for wheat sowing, another aligning with Altair for rye, and a third mirroring Deneb when it was time to harvest flax. This wasn't just poetry, it was practical astronomy, accounting for varying growing seasons across microclimates. The alcove's depths even adjusted the reflection's timing. Shallower water caused stars to appear earlier in the evening, giving farmers extra days' notice for time-sensitive tasks. The economic implications were profound. Chronicles from Burgundy describe how lords would levy fines on tenant farmers who missed the star dates, proving these celestial markers carried legal weight. At harvest time, the reverse occurred. Moats reflecting autumn constellations like Aquarius became gathering points, their waters literally mirroring the urgency of reaping before rains arrived. The famous Harvest Star Moat at Warwick Castle exemplified this, where Fomalhaut's reflection would first touch a carved stone marker, triggering a frenzied 2-week window to gather crops. What's often overlooked is how these designs democratized astronomical knowledge. Unlike elaborate astrolabes or handwritten calendars accessible only to scholars, the moat's reflections were visible to all illiterate peasants and learned lords alike standing shoulder to shoulder, reading the same celestial signals. This shared cosmic language created a rare equality in medieval society, where the heavens dictated schedules more reliably than any human decree. The legacy lingers in surprising places. Modern agronomists studying traditional farming villages have found that some planting proverbs once thought superstitious, so when the moat drinks the bull's eye, referring to Taurus, actually encoded precise astronomical data. And while GPS-guided tractors have replaced star-aligned moats, there's poetry in knowing that centuries ago, the difference between famine and feast might have hung on how clearly a castle's waters held the reflection of a single bright star. These moats remind us that before satellites or smartphones, humanity found ways to weave the cosmos into the fabric of daily survival, turning distant suns into partners in the delicate dance of sowing and reaping. By the 16th century, the shimmering star mirrors of medieval moats began fading from Europe's landscapes, not with a dramatic collapse, but with a quiet shift in priorities. The rise of gunpowder changed everything. Thick, sloping earthworks replaced towering stone walls as the best defense against cannon fire, and the delicate balance of depth and stillness required for celestial reflections became irrelevant overnight. Why craft a moat to mirror Vega when a simple, muddy ditch could deflect artillery? But the decline wasn't just about practicality. The Renaissance ushered in a new worldview, one that placed humanity, not the heavens, at the center of creation. Castles morphed into palaces, their designs celebrating human achievement through symmetrical gardens and classical columns rather than cosmic alignments. The moat at Shay-Tau de Fontainebleau, once tuned to reflect the summer solstice, was filled in to make way for a sprawling courtyard where courtiers could stroll under open skies, no longer needing water to commune with the stars. Yet the shift wasn't universal. In some regions, star-reflecting moats clung to relevance through sheer cultural inertia. The Habsburgs kept the tradition alive at Schloss Ambras, where the moat's alignment with Orion's belt persisted into the 17th century, not for defense or agriculture, but as a nostalgic nod to dynastic heritage. Meanwhile, in Scandinavia, where long winters made celestial navigation vital, moats like those at Gripsholm Castle continued serving as frosty star maps well into the age of telescopes. These holdouts reveal a tension between progress and tradition, where the old ways lingered not because they worked better, but because they meant something. The scientific revolution delivered the final blow, as Galileo's telescope shattered the notion of perfect celestial spheres, and Newton's laws reduced the cosmos to equations. The magic of star-reflecting motes seemed quaint at best. Why rely on a water's surface to track Jupiter when a brass sextant could do it more accurately? By the 18th century, most surviving moats were either ornamental, filled with koi carp instead of constellations, or repurposed as part of elaborate water gardens. The moat at Versailles, once engineered to reflect Polaris during royal ceremonies, became a stage for fireworks displays, its cosmic symbolism reduced to a backdrop for human spectacle. What's often overlooked is how this decline mirrored broader societal changes. The Enlightenment's emphasis on rationality made the moat's dual role, as both spiritual portal and practical tool, seem paradoxical. Architects like Vauban dismissed star alignments as mysticism masquerading as masonry, prioritizing sheer functionality in their fortress designs. Even the Church, once a patron of celestial symbolism, redirected its focus toward grand domes and painted heavens, leaving moats to secular rulers who valued them more for prestige than piety. But traces of the old ways endured. In remote corners of Transylvania and Scotland, folklore kept the knowledge alive, with farmers still planting by the star waters long after the castles themselves had crumbled. And perhaps the most poetic afterlife of these moats lies in their influence on modern astronomy. The precise calculations medieval builders used to align their waters anticipated later techniques for telescope mirrors, proof that even abandoned innovations leave echoes. The star-reflecting moat didn't truly disappear. It merely dissolved into history like a constellation fading at dawn, its light absorbed by the new day. Modern technology has cracked open a window to the medieval mind, revealing star-aligned moats not as myths, but as meticulously engineered marvels. Archaeologists armed with LiDAR, laser scanning that peers through vegetation and soil, have mapped moats with astonishing precision, uncovering subtle curves and angles invisible to the naked eye. At Shay-Tau de Socinio in Brittany, scans revealed a moat's southern bank carved precisely to amplify the winter solstice reflection of Capella, a star long associated with protection in medieval lore. The discovery wasn't accidental. Centuries-old manuscripts found in the castle's archives described the star path in the water, but until LiDAR exposed the bank's intentional asymmetry, scholars dismissed it as poetic metaphor. Now we know medieval builders shaped Earth like opticians grinding lenses, sculpting landscapes to bend light to their will. Three-dimensional modeling has taken these findings further, simulating how star reflections would have interacted with castle architecture. Researchers at the University of Exeter recreated Bodiam Castle's moat digitally, inputting 14th-century star positions. The results were revelatory. On certain nights, the reflection of Draco the dragon would appear to coil around the castle's central keep, aligning with carved dragon motifs on the gatehouse. This wasn't random, it was celestial theater where the moat became a dynamic backdrop for displays of power. Even more striking, some moats show evidence of corrective adjustments. At Raglan Castle in Wales, scans detected patches where the moat's slope was subtly altered, likely to compensate for sedimentation that dulled reflections, proof these designs were maintained with exacting standards across generations. The most compelling evidence comes from cross-disciplinary collaborations. Astronomers analyzing alignment patterns have identified moats functioning as rudimentary observatories. Eton College's medieval moat, long thought ornamental, actually frames the rising point of Sirius during the dog days of summer, a feature that would have helped predict seasonal floods. Meanwhile, hydrologists studying water flow in these moats made an unexpected discovery. many feature hidden channels or submerged baffles that stabilized reflections. At Dover Castle, sonar revealed a network of wooden posts embedded in the moat bed, acting like an ancient version of image stabilizing technology to counteract ripples from wind or wildlife. What's emerging is a picture of medieval Europe as a hotbed of applied astronomy, where moats were the period's equivalent of high-tech interfaces between Earth and sky. Recent digs have turned up tangible clues: two compasses with star charts etched into their bases, Mason's levels calibrated to celestial angles, even fragments of stained glass embedded in moat walls to enhance specific reflections. At Malbork Castle in Poland, archaeologists found a slate slab near the moat inscribed with constellation diagrams and depth measurements, essentially a medieval engineer's cheat sheet for tuning water mirrors. This renaissance of interest isn't just rewriting history books, it's inspiring modern architects. Teams designing reflective memorials and planetariums now study medieval moat hydraulics for insights into controlling light on water. There's poetic justice in this. Technologies once dismissed as superstition are now recognized as groundbreaking innovations. As LiDAR unveils more star-aligned moats across Europe, each discovery chips away at the outdated notion of the Middle Ages as a dark interlude between antiquity and enlightenment. These shimmering pools weren't just functional or beautiful, they were the medieval world's way of reaching for infinity, one star-flecked ripple at a time. Not every castle moat was a shimmering mirror to the stars. In fact, the majority served far more practical purposes. Picture the classic medieval moat, a deep, murky trench bristling with sharpened stakes, its waters deliberately choked with algae and debris to slow attackers. These were engineering solutions, not celestial canvases. The distinction matters because it sharpens our appreciation for those rare moats that did double duty as astronomical tools. For every Shay-Tau to Chambord with its precision-aligned reflections, there were hundreds of fortresses where the moat's only job was to keep siege ladders at bay. Take the Tower of London's moat, for example. Historical records show it was originally fed by the Thames, its tidal surges making the water far too turbulent for clear reflections. Instead, its design prioritized defensive cunning. The sloping sides forced attackers to wade through chest-deep water, while archers rained arrows from above. Similarly, the moats surrounding Welsh castles like Caerphilly were engineered as cascading layers, creating staggered water barriers that would bog down advancing troops. These were instruments of war, not stargazing aids. Even the iconic moat at Warwick Castle, though picturesque today, was historically a noxious stew of runoff and waste, its surface churned by patrol boats rather than polished for planetary observations. Why does this myth persist? Partly because we're drawn to the romance of intertwining astronomy and architecture. It's far more enchanting to imagine knights pondering Vega's reflection than to accept that most moats were essentially glorified septic tanks. But the reality reveals something equally fascinating. The star-reflecting moats stand out precisely because they were exceptions, not norms. Their existence speaks to a society capable of both brute force military engineering and delicate celestial choreography, sometimes within the same castle walls. Archaeological evidence helps separate fact from folklore. At Crac des Chevaliers, the Crusader stronghold in Syria, core samples from the moat show layers of deliberately deposited silt, a tactic to create shallower, calmer sections for ritual star observations near the chapel, while the outer moat remained a defensive nightmare. This duality appears across cultures. Japan's Heimji Castle boasted a nightingale floor to detect intruders just meters away from a tranquil garden pool calibrated to reflect the autumn moon. The takeaway isn't that star-aligned moats didn't exist. but that their creators went to extraordinary lengths to carve celestial precision into an otherwise utilitarian feature. Modern laser scans have exposed another clue. True reflection moats often show subtle differences in construction. Their walls might be lined with smoother stone or angled more precisely, while purely defensive moats favored jagged, irregular surfaces to shred climbing attempts. At Beaumaris Castle in Wales, scans revealed one quadrant of the moat with a carefully leveled base, an anomaly in an otherwise haphazard trench. Historians now believe this section was reserved for solstice ceremonies, while the rest fulfilled standard defensive roles. The broader lesson here is about medieval ingenuity's spectrum. Just as we don't assume every cathedral window held astronomical significance, we shouldn't romanticize every moat as a cosmic mirror. But by recognizing the exceptions, those remarkable hybrids where starlight met siege-craft, we glimpse the full brilliance of an era that could pivot from the pragmatic to the sublime without missing a beat. These builders didn't just keep people out, they found ways to let the universe in. The precision behind these star-aligned moats reveals a hidden chapter in the history of mathematics, one where medieval builders manipulated angles and light with near-miraculous accuracy, centuries before optics became a formal science. At its core, the phenomenon of reflection follows a deceptively simple rule. Light bounces off a surface at the same angle it arrives, known as the angle of incidence equaling the angle of reflection. While scholars like Alhazen had documented this principle in the Islamic world, European castle architects demonstrated an uncanny ability to apply it practically, without formal equations or protractors. Take the moat at Berg Eltz, where the northern bank slopes at precisely 42 degrees, not for structural stability, but so that Polaris light would reflect directly toward the castle's chapel window during winter solstice prayers. This wasn't guesswork, it was geometry carved into earth and water. Even more astonishing is how some designs compensated for atmospheric refraction, the bending of starlight as it passes through Earth's atmosphere. At Mont Saint-Michel, the moat's western edge curves subtly upward, a feature long dismissed as erosion until laser scans showed it perfectly counters the distortion of low-horizon stars like Arcturus. Manuscripts from the abbey's monks describe watching the star climb the moat's reflection as it rose higher in the sky, suggesting they understood that air density altered celestial positions. This knowledge, far ahead of its time, allowed builders to create reflections that appeared truer than the stars themselves looked to the naked eye. The tools behind these feats were surprisingly humble. Builders relied on plumb lines and water-filled trenches as natural levels, using the moon's reflection to test surface flatness. At Shay-Tau de Vincennes, archaeologists found notched stones along the moat's rim, early protractors marking key angles for summer and winter constellations. These adaptations reveal a hands-on mastery of spatial relationships, where intuition and observation bridged the gap between theory and practice. A mason might not have known the law of reflection by name, but he could shape a bank so that Cassiopeia's distinctive W appeared upright in the water rather than inverted, a subtle correction requiring deep understanding of light's behavior. What truly shatters the myth of the Dark Ages is the evidence of iterative refinement. At Malbork Castle, successive layers of sediment show the moat was deliberately deepened by 8 inches over 50 years, not for defense, but to sharpen the reflection of Vega as its celestial position shifted due to axial precession. This long-term adjustment, mirroring the star's gradual drift, implies generations of builders passing down precise observational records. Modern astronomers calculating these shifts confirm the moat's modifications kept pace with celestial movement to within a margin of error smaller than the width of a human hair. The implications are profound. These moats weren't just artistic flourishes or religious symbols, they were medieval Europe's equivalent of supercomputers, encoding celestial mechanics in stone and water. When a builder angled a moat to reflect Aldebaran precisely onto a chapel altar on Easter morning, he was performing calculations that wouldn't be formalized in textbooks for another 3 centuries. That such sophistication emerged without the scaffolding of formal academia speaks volumes about the period's ingenuity. Far from being a dark pause in scientific progress, the Middle Ages were quietly laying groundwork for the Renaissance's astronomical revolution, one star-lit moat at a time. Medieval storytellers wove star-reflecting moats into legends where water didn't just mirror the sky, it became a portal to other realms. In the Arthurian tale Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, a mysterious castle's moat reflects not just stars but constellations from myth, its surface so still it seems to hold an entire alternate heaven. When Gawain peers into its depths, the reflection of Orion's belt transforms into the shimmering path he must follow to prove his worth. This wasn't mere fantasy. It echoed real beliefs that such moats were thresholds between worlds, their starry surfaces acting as cosmic gates only the worthy could cross. Folklore from Brittany tells of a knight who vanishes into his castle's moat on Midsummer's Eve, reappearing years later with knowledge of future battles, his armor still dripping with starlight. Similar stories across Europe describe moats as testing grounds, where the clarity of a knight's reflection in the water determined their purity of heart. A distorted image might reveal hidden treachery, while a perfect twin of the night sky signaled divine favor. These narratives reveal how deeply these celestial mirrors permeated the medieval psyche, blending astronomy with morality tales. The moat's role in legend wasn't just symbolic, it was interactive. Scandinavian sagas describe warriors whispering secrets to the water, believing reflections of the North Star would carry their words to the gods. In Welsh lore, the Lady of the Lake's palace is said to lie beneath a moat that reflects not the sky above, but an entirely different sky, one where familiar constellations form unfamiliar patterns, hinting at parallel worlds. Even saints' lives incorporated these motifs. The Golden Legend recounts how Saint Wolfgang baptized converts in a frozen moat, its ice preserving the reflection of the Christmas star as a perpetual miracle. What's striking is how these stories persist beyond the Middle Ages. Shakespeare's Hamlet borrows from this tradition when the prince encounters his father's ghost near Elsinore's moat, its waters eerily still under a sky empty of stars, a visual cue that the natural order has been upended. Centuries later, Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring reimagined the trope with the Mirror of Galadriel, a basin of water that shows things that were, and things that are, and things that yet may be, much like the prophetic moats of medieval lore. These tales do more than entertain, they preserve a lost way of seeing. When a Scottish ballad describes a maiden stepping into a moat to dance with her reflection among the stars, it captures the medieval view of water as a living, responsive force. Unlike modern stories where mirrors merely show reality, these moats altered it, bending fate and revealing truths hidden to the naked eye. So the next time you encounter a castle moat in an old story, look closer. That shimmering surface might just be the most powerful character in the tale, a silent witness to vows, a judge of souls, and sometimes a doorway to the impossible. Across the world, cultures that never exchanged architectural blueprints arrived at the same breathtaking idea: still waters that could cradle the night sky like liquid mirrors. While European castles tuned their moats to reflect specific constellations, Japanese architects designed koi ponds in castle gardens to capture the Milky Way during the Bon Festival, when ancestral spirits were believed to traverse its shimmering path. The similarity isn't coincidence, it's evidence of a universal human impulse to stitch the cosmos into the fabric of daily life. In China's summer palace, the marble boat pavilion floats on a lake precisely angled so that the full moon's reflection aligns with a carved jade rabbit, symbolizing the lunar palace of Chang. Just as European lords used celestial reflections to legitimize their rule, Chinese emperors staged ceremonies where the moon's image would appear to dock against this marble vessel, visually anchoring heavenly mandate to earthly power. The techniques behind these designs reveal both shared principles and ingenious local adaptations. Japanese castle ponds, like those at Heimji, often employed submerged stone platforms called star seats to stabilize reflections during windy nights, a solution paralleling Europe's hidden baffles but crafted from volcanic rock rather than timber. Where European moats prioritized depth for clarity, Chinese gardens favored expansive shallows, using wide surfaces to reflect not just stars but entire sections of the night sky. The Kunming Lake in Beijing's Yehayuan district was contoured to create a celestial bowl effect, where the reflection of the Big Dipper would appear perfectly proportioned during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Unlike the defensive dual purpose of European moats, these Asian features were purely ceremonial, their stillness maintained by intricate networks of underground channels that regulated water flow with precision worthy of modern hydraulics. Spiritual connections transcended geography too. In Kyoto's Zen gardens, raked gravel around ponds symbolized cosmic waves, making the star reflections appear to float on an infinite sea, a concept hauntingly similar to European alchemists viewing moats as portals between realms. Both traditions believed water could purify celestial energy, where European rituals used star-charged moat water for baptisms. Japanese Shinto ceremonies collected star dew from pond surfaces to bless newborns. The most striking parallel emerges in navigation. Just as European castles guided travelers with Polaris reflections, Japanese coastal fortresses like Matsumi Castle used pond mirrors of Vega to help fishing boats navigate foggy straits, proving great minds across continents truly do think alike when staring at the same stars. Yet fascinating differences emerge in how each culture interpreted distortions. European chronicles often portrayed ripples as divine warnings, while Japanese garden manuals celebrated them as dragon scales, evidence of celestial creatures stirring beneath the surface. Chinese astronomers went further, recording how atmospheric haze altered star reflections in the Forbidden City's canals, using these variations to predict weather, an early form of scientific observation masked as poetry. The materials too tell a cultural story. European moats relied on local limestone, Japanese ponds on volcanic basalt, and Chinese canals on fired clay tiles, each medium subtly tinting reflections to match regional aesthetic ideals: cool silver in Europe, deep indigo in Japan, and golden-hued in China from the famous yellow earth clay. What unites these traditions is their refusal to see water as merely functional. Whether defending a castle or honoring ancestors, these cultures chose to transform humble ponds and trenches into dialogues with the infinite. The star-reflecting waters of Heimji, Versailles, and the Summer Palace stand as monuments to a shared human truth, that we've always sought to touch the heavens, even if only through their fleeting reflection in a quiet pool at night. In the end, these mirrors of stone and starlight remind us that curiosity and wonder know no borders, only the universal night sky we all gaze upon. The church wielded immense influence over medieval architecture, and star-aligned moats became unexpected battlegrounds in the struggle to define where sacred geometry ended and forbidden astrology began. In monasteries like Cluny, abbots commissioned moats that reflected the cross of Cygnus during feast days, framing the constellation's shape as a heavenly endorsement of Christian devotion. These designs received papal approval by positioning celestial reflections as visual sermons, proof that the heavens themselves bowed to divine will. A 12th century manuscript from Canterbury describes how monks would process around their moat chanting psalms as the reflection of Vega touched a cross-shaped notch in the parapet, turning astronomy into liturgy. Yet not all star-aligned water met with such acceptance. When the Bishop of Winchester inspected Shay-Tau de Lusignan's moat in 1324, he ordered its alignment with the Pleiades destroyed, condemning it as a pagan echo that invited demonic influence. This wasn't mere superstition. The Church recognized the power of these liquid mirrors to shape beliefs. Moats reflecting pre-Christian constellations like Draco or Cernunnos became flashpoints, their waters seen as rival fonts of spiritual authority. At Montségur, Cathar heretics allegedly used their fortress moat to track the star Algol, nicknamed the Demon's Head, fueling accusations of occult practices during the Albigensian Crusade. The tension often hinged on interpretation. Some clerics embraced moats that reinforced biblical imagery. The Abbey of Fontevraud engineered its water to mirror the Star of Bethlehem every Christmas Eve, while Durham Cathedral's cloister moat reflected Orion's belt as the three wise men during Epiphany. But identical techniques applied to non-scriptural stars risked condemnation. A fascinating compromise emerged at York Minster, where the moat's curves were adjusted to reflect only stars mentioned in the Vulgate Bible, creating what chroniclers called a sieve for heaven's light. This push and pull catalyzed medieval Europe's first debates about experimental science. When the astronomer monk Roger Bacon defended star-aligned moats as tools for calculating Easter's date, he framed them not as magic, but as God-given instruments to measure creation's clockwork. His writings reveal how these shimmering pools became test cases for reconciling faith with observation. If the heavens declared God's glory, shouldn't studying their reflections be an act of worship? The Church's eventual tolerance for certain celestial moats laid groundwork for Renaissance thinkers like Copernicus, who would later cite monastic star charts in his revolutionary models. The legacy lingers in unexpected places. Modern scholars analyzing Vatican archives discovered that many approved moats secretly retained pagan alignments, their Christian symbolism overlaying older star lore like a palimpsest. At Wells Cathedral, the moat's surface still captures the winter solstice sunrise precisely where a carved green man grins from the masonry, hinting at the unspoken compromises between faith and folklore. These star-reflecting waters weren't just engineering feats. They were liquid negotiations in the medieval struggle to harmonize divine order with human curiosity, where every ripple carried echoes of a world trying to reconcile the heavens above with the earth below. Maintaining a moat's mirror-like surface was anything but effortless. It demanded relentless vigilance against nature's chaos. Algae could turn crystal waters into murky soup in weeks, while fallen leaves or blown debris shattered reflections like stones tossed into glass. Builders faced a paradox. Water deep enough to deter invaders was prone to disruptive currents, yet shallow edges bred stagnation and rapid plant growth. The solution, a hidden world of medieval hydraulics. At Shay-Tau de Pyriphons, archaeologists uncovered a labyrinth of submerged channels that quietly circulated water, preventing stagnation without creating visible ripples. These weren't simple drains, they were precision-engineered veins, some lined with charcoal to filter impurities, others with porous limestone that subtly mineralized the water to inhibit algae. Records from Berg Eltz describe teams of water monks who skimmed surfaces daily with horsehair nets stretched between poles, their movements choreographed to avoid disturbing the moat's stillness. Weather posed even fiercer challenges. A sudden storm could undo months of calibration. so builders developed ingenious buffers. Some moats featured floating reed mats, ancestors of modern wave breakers, that absorbed wind energy before it reached the main surface. At Beaumaris Castle, concentric rings of submerged wicker baskets broke up incoming waves, creating a calm central stage for reflections regardless of outer turbulence. Winter brought its own trials. Ice might preserve star patterns beautifully, but thawing risked jagged fractures that ruined alignments. Manuscripts from Scandinavian castles reveal how keepers maintained open patches using hot stones lowered on chains early to icing that balanced temperature and tranquility. The true testament to their dedication lies in the failures. Core samples from ruined moats show layers of different sand grades, evidence of continual experiments to find the perfect bottom lining. At Kenilworth, layers of discarded oyster shells beneath the moat suggest builders believed calcium carbonate would clarify water, a theory proven right centuries later by modern chemistry. Even animal life was managed. Carp were introduced not just for food, but because their bottom-feeding habits kept sediment stirred without surface disturbance. Every solution was a tightrope walk between control and nature, where the slightest overcorrection could turn a celestial mirror into a muddled puddle. What's striking is how these struggles elevated mere maintenance into an art form. At its peak, the craft birthed specialized tools like the star gauge, a notched pole used to measure reflection clarity, and gave rise to professions like moat whisperers, who could read subtle water patterns like pages in a book. Their legacy whispers to us across time that perfection isn't about eliminating challenges, but embracing them with such creativity that every obstacle becomes part of the beauty. These shimmering pools didn't just defy nature's chaos, they danced with it, turning each ripple smoothed and each leaf removed into an act of devotion to the heavens above. The shimmering legacy of medieval star-reflecting moats lives on in the soaring arches and reflective pools of modern architecture, where designers still chase that elusive magic of capturing the heavens on water. Walk through the National September 11 Memorial in New York, and you'll notice how the twin reflecting pools seem to pull the sky downward, transforming clouds and sunlight into a living tribute. This isn't just aesthetic, it's a conscious revival of the medieval belief that water can tether the cosmic to the earthly. Architects like Michael Arad, who designed the memorial, have openly drawn inspiration from historical moats, using advanced engineering to achieve what medieval builders did with intuition and patient observation. The parallel is striking. Where castle moats mirrored constellations to mark sacred moments, these contemporary pools reflect the shifting sky to honor memory itself, turning grief into something as vast and timeless as the stars. Museums worldwide have embraced this ancient dialogue between water and light. The Louvre Abu Dhabi's dome, perforated like a star chart, casts a mesmerizing rain of light onto its shallow surrounding pools, a direct nod to the celestial alignments of Shay-Tau to Chambord's moat. But here, the technology is cutting edge. Subsurface pumps and computer-controlled filters maintain absolute stillness, allowing the water to hold the dome's intricate shadow patterns with photographic clarity. It's a medieval concept supercharged by modern hydraulics, proving that our fascination with liquid mirrors hasn't faded, it's evolved. Even the viscosity of the water is adjusted seasonally, compensating for temperature changes that might distort reflections, much like medieval builders deepened their moats to sharpen Orion's image. Memorials take this further, using reflections to collapse time and space. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, with its black granite wall meeting a precisely angled pool, creates a moment where visitors see their own faces framed by the names of the fallen, an intimate twist on the medieval idea of the moat as a bridge between realms. Designer Maya Lin described her work as a rift in the earth, but in function, it echoes the star wells of Gothic cathedrals, where still waters turned memorial plaques into portals to the infinite. Modern materials amplify the effect. Where medieval moats relied on limestone to soften reflections, today's memorials use engineered composites to eliminate distortion entirely, achieving a mirror-like perfection that would have dazzled even Renaissance astronomers. The most poetic revival might be in planetarium design. The ESO Supernova Planetarium in Germany features an outer moat that doesn't just reflect stars, it tracks them. Using real-time data from telescopes, submerged projectors adjust the water's shimmer to mirror current celestial activity, blending medieval technique with live astrophysics. Visitors walking the perimeter at night witness a modern incarnation of Berg Eltz's navigational moat, where stars don't just appear, they move, pulse, and explode in the water's surface. It's a fitting homage to the past. What began as a way to mark planting seasons or royal coronations now teaches us about supernova and exoplanets, proving that humanity's urge to touch the cosmos through water hasn't diminished, only our tools have changed. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in what these modern designs choose to omit. Unlike their medieval predecessors, today's reflective pools rarely serve practical functions. No defense, no agriculture, no astrology. Their power is purely symbolic, reminding us that in an age of satellites and space telescopes, we still crave that primal connection forged by our ancestors staring into quiet waters under open skies. The star-reflecting moat hasn't disappeared. It's been distilled to its essence, a testament to the enduring human need to see ourselves, our memories, and our dreams reflected in the infinite. Spotting a star-aligned moat isn't just about stumbling upon a pretty reflection, it's detective work, where geometry, history, and folklore intersect. Archaeologists start with the moat's shape. Unlike the jagged, haphazard trenches of purely defensive moats, celestial mirrors often curve in precise arcs or angles, mirroring segments of the night sky. At Shay-Tau de Socinio, laser scans revealed a subtle crescent in the southern bank, matching the trajectory of the winter solstice moon. These shapes weren't accidental. They were calculated to frame specific constellations, like a stone picture frame holding a starry portrait. Historical records provide another vital clue. Monastery chronicles and builders' ledgers often hid celestial references in plain sight. A mention of the star path in the water or the Lord's mirror might seem poetic until you realize their technical descriptions. In Canterbury, a faded marginal note in a 12th century manuscript described draining the moat to true its face to the bull's eye, a clear reference to aligning the water's surface with Taurus. Even seemingly mundane entries like payments for smoothing stones for the mirror take on new meaning when you realize they weren't talking about glass, but the moat's polished edges. Local legends are treasure troves for amateur historians. Stories of enchanted waters or knights receiving visions from the moat often preserve astronomical knowledge in mythic disguise. A Welsh tale about a lake where the lady stars dance upside down led researchers to rediscover Raglan Castle's moat, engineered to reflect Cygnus in perfect inversion during midsummer. Similarly, French farmers' sayings about sowing when the moat drinks the scorpion pinpointed Burgundy vineyards where the moat's alignment with Antares marked the last frost date. Technology has revolutionized this sleuthing. Satellite imaging can detect subtle earthworks invisible from the ground, while 3D modeling simulates how star positions would have interacted with a moat's contours centuries ago. At Bodiam Castle, drone footage revealed a now-buried channel that once stabilized reflections of Draco, proving the dragon carvings on its gates weren't just decorative, but part of a larger celestial narrative. Even amateur stargazers can contribute. Apps that overlay historical star maps onto modern landscapes help identify potential alignment points where moats might have once captured now forgotten celestial events. The most thrilling discoveries often come from combining these approaches. When a researcher in Poland noticed that the ruins of Olsztyn Castle's moat aligned with a local folk song about the three wells of the summer stars, excavations uncovered 3 stone-lined alcoves, each positioned to reflect Vega, Altair, and Deneb during the harvest season. It's these moments that transform crumbling stones and quiet waters into living history, where every ripple holds echoes of a time when the sky wasn't just observed, but invited to dwell among us. To the medieval mind, a moat reflecting the constellation Leo wasn't just a beautiful accident. It was a fortress literally bathing in the celestial power of the lion, a symbol of royal authority and divine favor. Astrology wasn't mere superstition in castle design. It was a calculated strategy where the stars dictated everything from construction dates to defensive layouts. Records from Burgundy reveal how architects timed the groundbreaking for new moats to coincide with Jupiter's alignment with Taurus, believing the bull's earthy strength would stabilize the foundations while the planet's expansive energy warded off future sieges. This wasn't whimsy, it was a worldview where cosmic forces flowed as tangibly as the water in the trenches themselves. Consider the case of the Pleiades, the compact star cluster often called the Seven Sisters. In multiple European castles, moats were angled to capture their reflection during harvest season, not just for practical timing but because medieval astrology linked the cluster's visibility to agricultural abundance. A clear reflection meant the star's fertile breath was being transferred to the land, a belief so entrenched that some lords levied higher taxes on villages whose castle moats showed particularly crisp star images, interpreting them as divine endorsements of prosperity. Conversely, a distorted or clouded reflection could trigger preemptive grain storage, with castle stewards treating the moat like a celestial weather vane. The zodiac's influence ran even deeper in defensive planning. Moats encircling castles governed by fire signs like Aries or Leo often featured hidden channels for flammable oils, their starlit surfaces doubling as omens for when to deploy these weapons. Chronicles from the 100 Years' War describe how the garrison at Shay-Tau would only ignite their moat's oil barrier when Mars' reflection appeared particularly bright, a tactic blending astrology with psychological warfare, as attackers interpreted the timing as heavenly sanction. Even the moat's shape could adhere to astrological principles: circular moats for lunar alignments, angular ones for planetary conjunctions, creating a kind of liquid horoscope etched into the landscape. But perhaps the most poignant examples come from personal astrology. At Heidelberg Castle, the Elector Palatine commissioned a private moat alcove that mirrored his natal chart's ruling planet, Venus, on his birthday each year. The reflection would illuminate a hidden alcove where he received counsel, a ritual blending governance with cosmic harmony. Similarly, pregnant queens often had temporary moats constructed to reflect Libra during their 3rd trimester, believing the scale's balance would ensure safe delivery. These practices reveal astrology not as fringe belief, but as a framework for life's most critical moments where architecture became a bridge between individual destiny and the infinite. The legacy of this fusion still whispers in modern astrology's architectural revival. Contemporary builders experimenting with harmonic design unconsciously echo medieval moat makers, using water features to amplify celestial energies. The difference, where today's designers might prioritize aesthetics, medieval architects wielded astrology as both science and spiritual armor, their star-glazed moats standing as testament to an era when the heavens weren't just observed, but invited to take up residence in stone and water. Henry VIII's Hampton Court boasted a moat that did far more than deter invaders. It was a liquid stage for political theatre. On the night of his marriage to Anne Boleyn, the moat was engineered to reflect the constellation Corona Borealis, the northern crown, its shimmering loops framing the castle like a celestial coronation. This wasn't just romantic symbolism. It was a calculated projection of divine legitimacy for a controversial union. Court astrologers had timed the wedding to coincide with the crown-shaped constellation's zenith, ensuring the reflection appeared at its brightest as guests crossed the moat's bridges. Chroniclers noted how the king would later pace the banks during diplomatic meetings, letting foreign envoys glimpse his silhouette superimposed over the stars, a silent reminder that his authority spanned both earth and heaven. Emperor Charles V took this fusion of power and cosmology even further. His palace at Eust featured a hexagonal moat with each side aligned to a different planetary symbol: Mars for war councils, Venus for courtship, Mercury for trade negotiations. The design wasn't arbitrary. Imperial astronomers had mapped the angles to capture each planet's reflection during its astrologically significant house. When the Treaty of Cambrai was signed in 1529, chroniclers describe how Charles deliberately positioned the French delegation where Jupiter's reflection would illuminate their documents, implying cosmic endorsement of the peace terms. Such moments reveal how rulers weaponized celestial reflections, turning astronomy into a language of soft power. Lesser-known nobles employed equally sophisticated tactics. Isabella d'Este, the Renaissance's First Lady, commissioned a starlit moat at her Mantua palazzo that doubled as a feminist manifesto. Its waters mirrored only constellations associated with goddesses Virgo during intellectual salons, Cassiopeia when receiving diplomats challenging the era's male-dominated cosmology. Meanwhile, in Scotland, James III's moat at Stirling Castle captured the rare alignment of Ursa Major and the moon on his birthday, a yearly spectacle reinforcing his image as the Northern Bear of Scottish independence. What united these rulers was their understanding that controlling celestial reflections meant controlling perception. When the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II faced rebellion, he allegedly drained his moat during a lunar eclipse, plunging the castle into darkness to simulate divine displeasure with his enemies. Conversely, the Medicis flooded their moats extra deep during comet appearances, amplifying the reflections to awe citizens into compliance. These weren't just architectural quirks, they were early psychological operations where water and light became tools to shape reality itself. The ultimate testament to this celestial showmanship lies in a nearly forgotten moat at the palace of the Dukes of Burgundy. Its surface was lined with crushed quartz, creating prismatic effects that made reflected constellations appear to dance. On state occasions, servants would release floating lanterns whose flames, seen through this crystalline water, transformed ordinary stars into what one ambassador called a heaven made humble before Burgundy's might. In that fleeting illusion, where human artifice briefly outshone nature's grandeur, we see the medieval world's most audacious ambition, not just to mirror the cosmos but to surpass it. Beneath their star-catching surfaces and defensive grandeur, medieval moats quietly served as thriving ecosystems, accidental sanctuaries where fish darted through submerged roots and water plants filtered sunlight into liquid gold. Far from being stagnant trenches, these engineered waterways functioned as medieval biodiversity hotspots, their depths sheltering pike, perch, and even rare medicinal herbs along their banks. The moat at Kenilworth Castle became so renowned for its tench population that local monks petitioned to fish its waters for Lenten meals, while Shay-Tau de Chevenix's aquatic plants were harvested for everything from wound poultices to natural dyes. This ecological richness wasn't incidental, it was woven into the moat's very design. builders unknowingly mimicked modern wetland principles by incorporating shallow shelves for reeds, deeper channels for fish spawning, and even submerged brush piles that acted as medieval versions of today's artificial reef structures. The secret to these thriving habitats lay in the moat's careful hydrology. Unlike natural ponds that could stagnate or flood unpredictably, castle moats were often fed by gravity-driven systems, diverted streams, or spring waters that kept oxygen levels high without disruptive currents. At Conwy Castle in Wales, archaeologists uncovered a sophisticated network of sluice gates that allowed stewards to periodically flush stagnant corners while preserving calm central zones where lilies could bloom. This balance created microhabitats, dragonflies hovering near sun-warmed edges, eels burrowing into the silt-rich depths, and waterfowl nesting safely beyond predators' reach. Records from Berg Eltz describe the moat as a fish larder that supplied Friday feasts, its biodiversity so valued that fishing rights were strictly controlled to prevent overharvesting, an early example of sustainable resource management. Modern ecologists are now studying these ancient designs for clues to tackle water management challenges. The layered vegetation along moat banks, from submerged oxygenators to emergent reeds, precisely mirrors contemporary constructed wetland systems used to filter pollutants from urban runoff. At Leeds Castle in Kent, water quality tests revealed that its medieval moat still outperforms nearby modern ponds in nutrient cycling, thanks to original design features like crushed limestone banks that naturally buffer acidity. Perhaps most strikingly, the moat's thermal mass helped regulate local microclimates, cooling castle interiors during heat waves while insulating against frost, a passive temperature control system that modern architects are revisiting as energy costs soar. The lessons extend beyond hydrology. Medieval moats demonstrate how human-made structures can evolve into ecological assets when designed with foresight. At Malbork Castle in Poland, the moat's intentional irregularities, once thought purely aesthetic, are now recognized as biodiversity boosters, creating varied flow patterns that support everything from microscopic plankton to otters. Similarly, the practice of coppicing willow trees along moat edges wasn't just for aesthetics. It provided sustainable building materials while preventing bank erosion, a practice replicated today in regenerative agriculture. These ancient water features whisper a timely truth. Functionality and ecology need not be opposing forces. Where modern drainage ditches often degrade landscapes, medieval moats enriched theirs, turning defensive necessities into thriving ecosystems that fed communities, healed the sick, and even inspired art. The 15th century Tres Riches Huras du Duc de Berry depicts moats teeming with swans and flowering irises, revealing how deeply these spaces were cherished as both practical resources and natural wonders. As climate change intensifies water management challenges, the humble moat's legacy offers a radical blueprint that our strongest fortifications might just be those that welcome life in all its forms, where still waters reflect not just the stars above, but the vibrant world beneath. The star-reflecting moats of medieval castles were more than just defensive trenches or ornamental water features. They were liquid portals to the cosmos, where science, spirituality, and sheer human ingenuity converged. These shimmering pools didn't merely hold water, they held entire constellations, carefully captured in their depths like celestial fish netted by stonemasons and astronomers. Imagine standing on the battlements of Chambord on a winter's night, watching Orion's belt stretch across the moat's glassy surface, its reflection perfectly aligned with the castle's central spire. This wasn't accidental beauty, it was a technological marvel, a testament to a world that saw no divide between the practical and the profound. What makes these moats truly extraordinary is how they embody the medieval mindset, a worldview where the heavens weren't distant and untouchable, but intimately woven into daily life. For builders, a moat that mirrored the stars was as much a tool as a telescope or a calendar. It marked the seasons, guided travelers, and even timed agricultural cycles with precision we'd later attribute to modern technology. For rulers, these reflections were propaganda carved in water and light, visual proof that their authority extended beyond Earth to the divine order above. And for the common people, the moat's starry surface was a shared compass, a democratized map of the cosmos accessible to anyone who dared to look down rather than up. Rediscovering these secrets today challenges our assumptions about the so-called Dark Ages. These moats weren't built by superstitious minds afraid of the unknown, but by keen observers who tracked celestial movements with naked eye accuracy rivaling modern instruments. The math behind aligning a moat to reflect Vega on a specific night, accounting for the angle of the water, the curvature of the Earth, and the star's own gradual drift across millennia, wasn't just impressive for its time. It was groundbreaking, a quiet revolution in applied science that laid foundations for the Renaissance's astronomical leaps. Yet beyond their technical brilliance, these moats speak to something timeless, humanity's longing to touch the infinite. Whether through medieval stargazers or modern planetariums, we've always sought ways to bring the cosmos within reach. The difference is, those castle builders did it without silicon chips or steel alloys, just water, stone, and an unwavering belief that the sky belonged among us as much as we belonged beneath it. So the next time you encounter a castle moat, don't just see a stagnant trench. Pause, look closer. That ordinary-looking water might still hold echoes of extraordinary nights when stars danced on its surface, whispering secrets to kings and farmers alike. And if you've ever spotted a moat that seems to catch the light just right, or know of a local legend about enchanted waters, share it below. After all, history's greatest discoveries often begin with someone noticing what others overlook. Who knows what celestial wonders might still be hiding in plain sight, waiting for a curious eye to rediscover them?